The night was quiet inside the Grand Hotel, the kind of silence that comes only after the last guests have gone to sleep. Chandeliers hung above polished marble floors, glowing faintly from the dim lights left on overnight. It looked perfect. On the surface, but hidden in the corners, were people who kept it that way: cleaners, cooks and janitors who worked while the world rested. Among them was a man named Samuel, the hotel janitor. His back was bent from years of lifting, his hands scarred from endless scrubbing, but his spirit was kind. He worked the night shift so his daughter could go to school during the day. No one noticed him much, except when something broke. And most who noticed barely remembered his name. But tonight, someone was watching in a dark corner of the lobby, dressed simply in jeans, a cap pulled low, and an old jacket, sat Keanu Reeves. He was there undercover, choosing to blend in as just another man. He often did this when he wanted to see the world without being seen, to remind himself of the lives lived outside of fame. Keanu's single quotes eyes followed Samuel as he moved across the lobby. The janitor carried a mop in one hand, his other hand stiff, swollen, and wrapped in tape. The sight made Keanu freeze. He could tell at once that the injury was serious, yet the man kept working as though nothing was wrong. Keanu stood, walking closer. "Sir," he said softly, his voice calm, "your hand, are you all right?" Samuel looked up, startled. No guest had ever spoken to him like that before. He forced a smile. "Just a little hurt, nothing more." But Keanu noticed the pain flickering in his eyes. "That doesn't look little," he said gently. "How did it happen?" Samuel hesitated, his shoulders heavy. For a moment, he looked like he might stay silent. Then, with a quiet sigh, he said, "It was the manager. He slammed the supply closet door on me yesterday when I asked for gloves. Said I was wasting money on things I didn't need." Keanu's chest tightened. Anger stirred inside him, but he kept his voice steady. "He hurt you, and you're still working?" Samuel nodded slowly. "I can't afford to stop. My daughter needs food, school supplies. If I lose this job, we'll have nothing, so I stay quiet." Those words struck Keanu deep. He had seen unfairness before, but hearing it spoken so calmly, so resigned, tore at his heart. "You don't deserve that," Keanu whispered. Samuel gave a small, tired laugh. "Life doesn't always give what we deserve. It gives what we survive." Keanu stood there, silent, the weight of those words settling heavy inside him. He had come here undercover just to watch, to listen. But what he had found was more than he expected. He looked at Samuel again, the broken hand still gripping the mop, at the quiet strength in his eyes despite the pain. And in that moment, Keanu knew this wasn't something he could just walk away from. The night wore on, and guests remained asleep, unaware of the silent struggle unfolding beneath their feet. But for Keanu, everything had changed. He didn't yet know how. But he would not let this man's suffering be hidden in the shadows any longer. Because sometimes the greatest heroes are not the ones on screens, but the ones who keep working when no one sees. And sometimes all it takes is one witness, one act of courage. To bring their truth into the light, Keanu could not sleep that night. He lay awake in the small guest room he had booked under another name, staring at the ceiling. The image of Samuel's swollen hand and his quiet words, "Life gives what we survive," echoed again. And again in his mind, he had seen pain before, but there was something different about this. Samuel wasn't asking for pity. He wasn't complaining. He was simply carrying a weight that no one should have to carry alone. By morning, the hotel lobby returned to its polished perfection. Guests in expensive suits hurried past. Staff smiled. Their practiced smiles, and no one gave a second thought to the man sweeping the corners. But Keanu watched. Samuel moved slower today, the pain in his hand clear, though he tried to hide it. Each time he bent to lift a bucket or push the mop across the floor, his body flinched. Keanu walked over, his cap still low on his forehead. "May I help you?" Samuel looked up in surprise. "You help me?" "Why not?" Keanu asked softly. "Your hand needs rest. If the manager sees you, I'll be in trouble. He says janitors are easy to replace." Keanu's jaw tightened. He wanted to reveal himself, to use his name and power to end this cruelty at once. But something stopped him. He needed to see more, to understand the truth fully before acting. Then, "Let me at least walk with you," Keanu said. "No one will notice." Samuel gave him a weary smile. "You're a strange guest. Most people don't even see me." "I see you," Keanu replied simply. Later that day, as the sun dipped low and the hotel quieted again, Keanu followed Samuel outside. They walked down the narrow alley behind the hotel, where workers tossed garbage into bins. There, away from the polished marble floors, the truth showed itself. Another janitor, younger than Samuel, leaned against the wall with bruises on his arm. When he saw them, he quickly pulled his sleeve down. Samuel lowered his voice. "Don't tell anyone, but he's not the only one. The manager. He pushes us too hard, yells, threatens, sometimes worse. But no one listens when we speak. We're invisible." Keanu's hands curled into fists inside his jacket pockets. He forced his voice to stay calm. "Have you tried reporting him?" Samuel laughed bitterly. "To who? The company protects?" "Him. Guests only see the shine, not the cracks. Well, people like Meep, people like us don't have voices." Those words struck Keanu like a knife. He knew what it meant to feel voiceless, to be overlooked, dismissed. But hearing it now from men, working in the shadows of a golden hotel, filled him with determination. "You have a voice," Keanu said firmly. "It just hasn't been heard yet. But it will." Samuel looked at him confused. "Why do you care so much? You're just a guest. Tomorrow you'll leave, and we'll still be here." Keanu held his gaze. "Maybe I'm not the guest you think I am." Before Samuel could ask what he meant, the back door swung open. The hotel manager stormed out, his face red with anger. "Samuel," he barked, "why are you standing here wasting time? And who is this?" His eyes narrowed at Keanu, full of disdain. Samuel bowed his head quickly. "Just a guest, sir." Manager sneered. "And tell your friend to mind his own business. Let me get back to work before I cut your hours again." Samuel's shoulders hunched as he hurried away. Keanu stood still, his eyes fixed on the manager. For the first time, he felt the weight of revealing himself pressing against his chest. But not yet, not here. He would wait. He would watch. When the time came, he would make sure no one ignored Samuel or any of the others ever again, because silence had protected cruelty long enough. The next day, the hotel sparkled for a corporate event. Rich investors filled the lobby, laughing loudly, glasses of wine in their hands. The chandeliers gleamed brighter than ever, and staff hurried about like shadows, unseen and unthanked. Keanu walked quietly among them, dressed still in his plain clothes, unnoticed by the guests. His eyes, however, were not on the event, but on the workers moving silently along the edges. Samuel pushed a heavy cart filled with supplies, his injured hand trembling as he tried to grip the handle. Each step looked painful, but he pressed on. No one saw the sweat on his brow. No one cared. Keanu walked over, steadying the cart with one hand. "You shouldn't be lifting this," he whispered. Samuel flinched. "Yes." Glancing nervously toward the manager, who stood near the bar chatting with wealthy guests. "Please," he whispered back. "Don't draw attention. They'll punish me later." Keanu's jaw clenched, but he stayed quiet. His anger burned beneath the surface like a storm waiting to break. As the evening wore on, Keanu noticed more. A cleaner dropped a tray, and the manager grabbed him by the collar, hissing threats into his ear. Another worker asked for a break, only to be shouted at in front of everyone. Each cruelty chipped away at Keanu's patience. Finally, after the event ended and the guests left, he found Samuel in the supply closet, slumped against the wall, cradling his broken hand. "Samuel," Keanu said softly, kneeling beside him, "this has to stop." Samuel shook his head. "You don't understand. I can't afford to lose this job. My daughter, she's only 12. She dreams of becoming a doctor someday. I promised her I'd keep her in school. If I lose this, I break that promise." His voice cracked, and Keanu felt his chest tighten. Samuel continued, his eyes distant. "My wife passed away 3 years ago. Since then, it's just been me and her. I don't care what happens to me, but I can't let her lose her chance. Silence filled the small room, heavy and raw. Keanu finally spoke, his voice low but steady. Samuel, you are stronger than you know. You've carried this burden alone for too long, but you're not alone anymore. I promise you something will change. Samuel looked at him, doubt in his tired eyes. How? People like us don't win. We're replaceable. Keanu stood slowly, his decision burning clear in his mind. Then it's time they see you're not replaceable. It's time they see the truth. Later that night, as the hotel emptied and the city outside grew quiet, Keanu removed his cap and jacket in his private room. For the first time, he looked at himself in the mirror, no longer hidden. Tomorrow, he would stop being just another face in the crowd. Tomorrow, he would reveal who he really was. And when he did, the walls of silence around Samuel's suffering, the suffering of all the workers, would finally begin to crack. What neither of them knew, however, was that this reveal would not only shake the hotel, but also expose secrets much darker. Then broken hands and cruel words. The following morning, the hotel buzzed with its usual rhythm. Guests checked out with suitcases, business meetings filled the lobby, and the staff moved silently in the background, their tired faces masked by forced smiles. But beneath the glittering chandeliers and polished marble, tension simmered. Keanu walked through the lobby without his cap, his face uncovered. This time people noticed. Whispers rippled through the crowd as heads turned. Is that KeanuReeves? A guest murmured. Another gasped, nearly dropping her coffee. The staff froze in shock. Some hid smiles, others exchanged stunned glances. Samuel, pushing his mop across the floor, stared in disbelief. The manager, red-faced and flustered, stormed across the lobby, plastering on a fake grin. Mr. Reeves, what an honor to have you here. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Keanu's eyes were calm, but his voice was firm. Because I wanted to see how this place really works. Not the show you put on for rich guests, but the truth. Room fell silent. Staff stopped moving, their eyes locked on him. The manager laughed nervously. Truth, sir. I assure you, this hotel is one of the finest in the city. Keanu stepped aside, motioning toward Samuel. Is that what you call this a man working with a broken hand because you slammed a door on him? Cleaners bruised and threatened? Staff too afraid to speak because you treat them as less than human? Gasps filled the lobby. The manager's smile faltered, his face turning pale. That's nonsense. Lies. These workers are exaggerating. Before he could finish, Samuel stepped forward, his voice trembling but loud enough to carry. It's not a lie. Everything he said is true. Another cleaner spoke up. He yelled at me in front of guests when I asked for a break. Then another, he threatened to fire me when I complained about the hours. The voices rose, one after another, a chorus of pain that had been silent for too long. Keanu turned, his gaze sweeping across the staff. You don't have to be silent anymore. Your voices matter. Your dignity matters. No one should be treated as disposable. The guests watched in shock. Some pulled out their phones, recording every word. The manager stammered, sweat dripping down his forehead. Mr. Reeves, please. This is a misunderstanding, but Keanu didn't let him finish. No. The misunderstanding is that you believed cruelty would stay hidden. You thought no one would. Notice the people who keep this place alive. But I noticed, and now the world will too. The staff stood straighter, their fear slowly turning into courage. Samuel's eyes glistened with tears as he whispered, "Thank you." For the first time in years, he felt seen, but this was only the beginning. Exposing the manager was one step. The deeper fight was still to come, the fight to make sure workers like Samuel were never silenced again, and Keanu knew this battle would be harder, louder, and far more dangerous than anyone in that lobby could yet imagine. The lobby was no longer silent. Whispers spread quickly, phones recorded, and eyes locked on the scene unfolding. The staff, once quiet shadows, now stood in the light of truth. The manager tried to regain control, waving his hands. Back to work. This man is twisting things. You should be grateful you even have jobs. But his words only added fuel to the fire. A housekeeper, trembling but brave, spoke up. Grateful? I work 14 hours and can't even afford medicine. For my sick mother, a young waiter stepped forward. Takes tips from us. Says it's hotel policy, but it's his pocket they go into. Each confession struck like lightning. The manager's face turned red, then white. Keanu raised his voice, steady and strong. You are not invisible. Your voices deserve to be heard. If this place refuses to respect you, then I will make sure the world knows. No one can hide cruelty behind marble floors forever, guests muttered among themselves. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others applauded quietly. The truth was out, and it could not be shoved back into silence. But the manager, cornered and furious, hissed, You think being famous means you can ruin me? You don't know who you're dealing with. This hotel has powerful investors. They won't listen to janitors and cleaners. They'll listen to me. Samuel stepped forward, clutching his injured hand but standing tall. Maybe you're right. We don't have money or power. But we have something stronger, truth. People are listening now. The workers nodded, their voices rising in agreement. Keanu placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder, grounding him. He's wrong. Investors may control money, but they don't. Control what the world sees. And the world is watching. He glanced at the guests recording on their phones. Every person here will carry this story. Every video will spread. The truth always finds its way. The manager stammered, trying to shout them down, but his voice drowned under the rising strength of the workers. Later that evening, the scene exploded online. Clips of the confrontation spread across social media. KeanuReeves standing beside a janitor, calling out injustice. The world reacted with shock, anger, and admiration. Messages of support poured in. Reporters arrived at the hotel the next day. Staff members who had been afraid for years finally found the courage to speak openly, but with the attention came backlash. The investors moved fast, trying to silence the story, trying to protect the hotel's image. Threats were whispered. Lawyers were called. Samuel grew nervous. They'll crush us, he whispered to Keanu. They'll bury the truth before it changes anything. Keanu shook his head firmly. Not this time. They may have money, but we have something they can't buy: people's hearts. Once the world sees injustice, it can't unsee it. Still, the fight was not over. This was bigger than one hotel. It was about workers everywhere who lived in silence. Believing their voices didn't matter, Keanu knew the storm was only beginning. But he also knew storms reveal the strongest souls. And now, Samuel and the others were no longer invisible. They were ready to stand, no matter the cost. Asterisk, the following week, the hotel stood under a storm louder than any thunder. News cameras crowded the entrance, workers gathered in protest, and guests canceled their stays. The polished marble lobby that once hid silence now echoed with demands for justice. Samuel stood among the workers, his broken hand bandaged properly at last, his voice trembling but strong. We are not invisible anymore, he told reporters. We are fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. We deserve respect. Keanu stood beside him, not as a star, but as a man lending his presence to amplify their voices. He didn't speak. Over them, he let them speak for themselves. When asked by the press why he was involved, he said simply, because no one should be punished for honesty, and no one should suffer in silence. The people who build our world deserve dignity. Manager tried to deny everything, his words bitter and defensive, but it was too late. Video evidence, testimonies, and the growing wave of public support made it impossible to hide. Desperate to protect their own names had no choice but to act. Within days, the manager was removed, and promises of reform were made. But for Samuel, the true victory wasn't in the headlines. It was in the way his fellow workers stood taller, their eyes brighter, their fear replaced by courage. It was in the way his daughter hugged him that night and whispered, "You're my hero, Dad." Keanu visited the bookstore-like quiet corner of the hotel, where Samuel often worked. You started this, he said softly. Samuel shook his head. No, you did. You gave us the courage to believe we mattered. Keanu smiled faintly. I only saw what was already there. The courage was always yours. Before leaving the city, Keanu wrote a note and placed it in Samuel's locker. Dear Samuel, you reminded me why voices must never be silenced. The world needs people like you, honest, humble, resilient. Never stop standing for your daughter. For yourself, for others. Storms will come, but storms always pass. Stay strong. Samuel read the letter with tears in his eyes, folded it carefully and placed it in his wallet, carrying it as a reminder that even in a life of hard shifts and heavy burdens, he was not invisible anymore. And as the sun rose over the city, a new truth stood clear. One act of noticing, one moment of kindness, can ripple outward and change more lives than anyone imagines. Because sometimes the greatest power isn't in fame, wealth, or strength. It's in choosing to see the unseen and to stand beside them until the world does too. And for Samuel, the janitor with a broken hand, and for Keanu, the man who refused to look away, that choice had turned silence into strength.